Hello, welcome back to part 2 of making my most ambitious knife yet. So in the last video we forged out this Twist Damascus Penta Alloy Gyuto, polished it up to 600 grit, ready for a handle. And in this video we're going to be forging out this zirconium bar and filling it up with Mammoth Ivory. Let me explain you what we're going to do. Okay, so right now our zirconium is this, a 30mm piece of round bar. We're going to upset that and forge it into this, hopefully, which is going to be some, say, 50mm square bar, a little flatter, 50 by 20. We're then going to mill out this shape on the milling machine with some files to get this frame handle, which we're then going to fill up with Mammoth Ivory. That's the plan. Before we get started though, I want to do a couple small tests to see how this zirconium responds to different techniques. First, I want to see how it files, just so we know if it's some hard stuff or maybe really soft. I've never worked with this before. So for me, it feels like it's similar to titanium, although it does seem to file easier than titanium. Maybe it doesn't. It's okay to file though, it's not that bad. I'd also like to see how it grinds, since I've seen some videos online where it sparks similar to titanium. That is definitely very similar to titanium. It grinds quite easily, so that's great. One last test I would like to do is to see how it mills. So we're gonna place it up here in the vise, take a couple small cuts. That wasn't too horrible, but we're definitely going to need sharper tooling. Other than that, the cut seems fine. These shavings are obviously very flammable, so we'll have to deal with that somehow. Other than that, let's start forging. I am very curious to see how this forges. It might be really hard, it might be really soft, we'll see. That is nice and orange hot. What do you call that? Okay. That's actually really soft. I think there was a video by Timothy Dick, he was forging this, and he said it was similar to bronze, and I agree with that, it's quite soft. But maybe not quite as soft as bronze. These heats are mostly to get a feel of the material before we go under the power hammer, just so I know what to expect. But I like what I'm feeling here. The zirconium is pretty interesting to forge. It's forming this white dioxide on the surface, zirconium dioxide, and it's this stuff is used as an abrasive industrially, so it's really hard, really tough, but it just flakes off in our case. Looks really nice. It makes the zirconium look white. Oh, that perfect. Oh yeah. You can see all the white scale just coming right off. That's so cool. We have our chunk of zirconium. It's looking pretty decent. This crack here shouldn't be too much of a problem. It doesn't run too deep and the chunk is more than big enough for our handle. I'm gonna clean it off, get the super tough zirconium oxide off there so we can actually cut and shape it. I'll do that with an old 60 grit belt on the belt grinder. That already took way too long and ripped up my belt. There's still some oxides in here. It's okay to grind as long as there's no oxides. If the oxide's on there, like nothing cuts. Because I think it's fairly similar to titanium where it work hardens as you're working. So if you're using dull abrasive of any kind or dull tools, it'll just harden and destroy your tools. I'm gonna draw out the outline of my knife handle. I'll cut off any excess before we continue. I didn't expect to have such a struggle with this zirconium because I thought it was quite soft, but I guess it's not. At first I'm gonna center drill the corners and then follow them up with an 8mm drill. Maybe coolant. There we go. And now swap that out for an end mill. That seems to be working quite fine actually. Wow. Definitely didn't expect that. Just hope I don't start a metal fire here. Pretty much done milling the inner shape. It looks horrible because I cannot cut curves with a mill. Many chips later and we have something that resembles the inside of a frame handle. So here's some zirconium chips so you can see what an actual zirconium fire looks like because it's not pleasant. Because if these chips in your milling machine start burning and they can cause a runaway fire. And then your whole machine's on fire. And imagine this, but with the wind of the spindle blowing it on. We are getting close to finishing. The handle is polished, or at least up to 1000 grit, ready to be buffed. Blade is up at 600 grit, so ready to be hand sanded and then etched. Also a logo still needs to happen. The pommel nut still needs to be cut off and get a screw or some kind of tightening mechanism. Gotta be able to make it loose and snug again. But now we gotta get this mammoth on there. And the mammoth consists of 2 scales. They're just not thick enough, but barely not thick enough to be used, to be just glued together. So we're gonna have to put some sort of a liner in between there before we can start fitting this in here. So let's go do that. Yeah, I've got this oak sheet just about perfect. I'm using super glue to glue them up. I like super glue just a little better than epoxy, that's it. The thick kind. The thick epoxy, or the thick super glue is really gap filling as well, just like epoxy. The thin super glue is more suited for small filling of really thin pockets where it needs to seep in. Let's quickly square that up. You really need dust collection with this ivory because it just stinks horribly. I'm gonna mark out the shape of our insert and we're gonna start grinding it out, which is gonna be quite a pain in the ass, I can tell you. The difficulty is to get everything nice and accurate without any gaps. That's roughly our shape, but I'm gonna grind it out roughly and then come back and remark it. So the ivory is so white and so vulnerable to dust that my dirty fingers are staining it. So from this point on, I'm gonna wear gloves so we keep a nice clean ivory. And we do have to mill the slot in the insert so that the tank can go through, because right now we're blocking off the tank slot. So I've clamped the insert piece in some paper towel and we'll take a few cuts. With the ivory installed in the handle, I'm gonna trim the sides almost completely flush, but just barely not, so that I can give them a little nice rounding. For the zirconium, to blacken it, we're gonna have to heat it up quite hot, about red hot. I don't know exactly how it works, I've never done this before. I might give it a try in the kiln, and before we do that, it's gotta be very, very clean and degreased, because any oil is gonna show as a blotch. I'm gonna clean it off with some alcohol, and then we're gonna give it a shot. I've fashioned a little holder from just some mild steel, little rack, and that's gonna hold up our part while it's in the kiln. So I've degreased it pretty thoroughly. So I'm gonna place it on the rack very carefully, and then we're gonna put that all in the kiln. We'll give it a shot and we'll see how it turns out. The handle is properly hot, so let's take it out and see if it gets the black oxide we are looking for. I gotta say, that does look very black. Oh, it's got a special color to it, or is that, no, that's the sign. That's the stop sign reflecting. I think that's as black as we can get it. I have the piece of ivory all polished up right here, and our frame also right here. Okay. Oh, no, not the paper. Snug fit, but that's supposed to be. Ooh, yeah, baby. Would you look at that? That's just spectacular, isn't it? That's hot, that's hot. Ow, 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 ow. Eh. There we go. Ow! And then we can run it nice and flat. Drill 2 small holes in the pommel nut, and this way we can tighten it with a spanner. Okay, so now with the handle finished, all we gotta do is finish up the blade. And to that, I'm gonna be using some 1000 grit sandpaper. I'm gonna be using this little handy dandy air tool, which it does rotate, but it mostly vibrates. The blade is degreased with just some water and soap. We're gonna do the first etch now. There we go. And let that sit for 10 minutes. We're gonna first do a deep etch, so get some height etched in there. Then we're gonna repolish it and then put it in a coffee so we can get some really nice contrast. Time to pull it out and time to polish it. One last thing we gotta do before we do the coffee etch is etch my name in there. We have my stencil, power supply, and a cup of salty water. Now it should start etching. You can also hear it hissing. And now it's time for the famous coffee etch. So there we go. So we'll be back in about 20 minutes. Ooh. It is time for the final assembly. We have our gorgeous blade right here and this little spanner, which we're gonna use to tighten it all up. Fit that up. And I'm gonna start to screw it in just by hand. That's it.